A huge body of water was renamed by a politician during the time of Jesus. Jesus' response is really helpful. Hi, I'm Jeremy. I'm a deep skeptic, also a pastor. You may have heard of the Sea of Galilee. It was named for the region in which it existed. Now, around the time of Jesus, there was a huge city built by Herod, and Herod named it after the Roman Emperor Tiberius. It was called Tiberias. And because of that city, the name of the Sea of Galilee changed to Tiberias. You can actually see this play out in the book of John. In chapter 6, it's called both the Sea of Galilee and the Sea of Tiberias. And by John 21, it's just the Sea of Tiberias. But the parallels between the political reality in that time and this, it's interesting. So Tiberius used his political power and influence and awarded huge government contracts to the wealthy, to his supporters, and enriched them through that and through things like giving them ownership of collecting taxes and all kinds of things. Another thing that Tiberius did that was really interesting is that he eventually began to call his detractors traitors and use the legal system to bring them up on charges of treason. Now, I know it's hard to imagine that a political leader would rename large bodies of water and use his influence to benefit the wealthy and award government contracts to them, as well as calling his detractors and his opponents traitors. But Jesus' response is really helpful because Jesus doesn't get distracted by the things that aren't the real causes. Like, he doesn't have a rename the Sea of Galilee campaign. He does things that are much more subversive. When Jesus asked about taxes, he says, give to Caesar what is Caesar's. This isn't like a cute way of saying, just pay your taxes. It's actually drawing a clear boundary between the way that the political powers define and value humans and the way that God does. In Luke 13, Jesus calls the regional authority, Herod, a fox. This isn't him being petty. This is him characterizing Herod as being unclean and second-rate rather than powerful and noble. And he consistently addresses the way that the powerful are exploiting the poor through taxes, and then those taxes are then being given to the rich in the form of government contracts. And he over and over says to his followers different ways of, don't follow this system. Don't imitate their power structures and the way that they wield power and the way that you engage with each other. Then there's this story in Luke chapter 5 where Jesus is casting out a demon, and he asks the demon to say its name. And the writer of that book has the demon say that its name is Legion. Legion is a technical term used by the Roman military to refer to one specific grouping of its forces. And this is pushing back in this incredibly strong way, saying that the Roman powers are evil, so evil that its military is demonic. Now imagine if a modern political leader renamed a huge body of water or used the word traitor to describe his political opponents and used the legal system to persecute his political opponents, and a modern political leader who would take the taxes that are disproportionately levied on the poor and give government contracts that are funded by those taxes to the wealthy and increasing the wealth of his supporters. How would Jesus respond? How should Christians who are following Jesus respond? Well, if you apply all of this to something like that, Jesus wouldn't get distracted by whatever the particularities are of the current drama. He would focus on what was really important, the underlying problems. He would call evil evil and would not shy away from calling out the people who are engaging in this evil for who they are. He would remind everyone that government does not define them, that God does, and God sees them as wonderful and beautiful and powerful. He would remind everyone to not get drawn into the pattern of the modern political system, to not get drawn into division and entrenchment. And he would remind the church not to follow the evil patterns of that political system and exploit the poor to increase the wealth of the system and the person running the system. In short, Jesus would begin to build something different, a shining example of a different path, something that would inspire people to push for a different direction.